Welcome back to another episode of NCBA's Coffee Break. I'm Nathan Willner, and I'm your host. And today I'm excited to have a really special guest and a very good friend joining us, Maryland State Delegate Jon Cardin. John wears a lot of hats. He's an attorney, an elected official, and uniquely an attorney who practices in the creditors' rights space. On top of that, he serves on the Judiciary Committee and chairs the Civil Law and Procedures Subcommittee, giving him a front row seat to the legislative developments that impact the judiciary and our industry. John, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Nathan. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
So let's go ahead and dive right in. The 2026 legislative session is starting next week. There's always a lot happening in Annapolis. From your perspective, what are some of the key priorities or themes you're seeing this year, especially those that might affect the creditors' rights industry?
Great. So let me just step back for 1 second, and I don't know if this only goes to Marylanders, but if it does, then this may be something they already know. But the legislative session in Maryland is essentially the first 3 months of the year. It's 90 days. It goes from the second Wednesday of January to the first second Monday in April of every year. And we are just about to begin next week. Very excited. And that's generally the calendar for majority of the states around the country. There are a few states that are year-round. There are a few states that meet at different times during the year, but most of the states also meet in the beginning of the year. Maryland's no exception. So we in Maryland have an unexpected budget deficit this coming year, about $1.5 billion, 1.4 billion is what it's expected to be right now. We had one last year, a structural deficit that we fixed, quote unquote, with some revenue increases and some appropriation decreases last year. We thought we were going to have a balanced budget this year. Then we had the federal government uh, uh, relieve about 25,000 people, federal employees who reside in Maryland from their jobs. That actually created an estimate of a tremendous amount of budget revenue decrease because all those jobs are now no longer providing revenue to tax. And because of that, we're expecting this large budget deficit. So that's probably the biggest issue of the year is how are we going to solve this? How are we going to find $1.4 billion in savings? We're probably not going to increase taxes or look for new revenues because 2026 is an election year. We have an election in November, and nobody wants to increase taxes in an election year. So it's probably going to be cuts and other transfers from non-annual funds, specialized funds. So that's going to probably be the biggest issue. In terms of policy issues, I'll just mention a couple. There's crime is always an issue. I think our governor has a great narrative to talk about in terms of crime being way, way down in Maryland, particularly serious crime or felonies are down over 40%, at least according to the numbers that the Department of Corrections and the Department of Public Safety are providing to us. And then certainly data centers is another big issue and energy in general. Energy costs have skyrocketed for people. It's going to be a big issue. And one of the caveats of that is that there's an interest in bringing data centers to Maryland, and data centers consume huge, huge quantities of both fresh water and energy. And that could actually increase the price of residential and commercial energy as well. So that's going to be a big issue this year. So those are just some of the larger themes that you're going to see this year. I could name a couple of others, but I think that's enough to start to
Yeah,
chew on.
yeah, that's a lot going on. And then also there was some leadership changes, correct? There's a new.
Yeah.
You want to talk
So
about that?
the
Mention that?
we the former Speaker of the House, Adrienne Jones, who was the Speaker for the last 6.5 years, resigned her position as Speaker. She's continuing to be a delegate and running for re-election, but she is not. She's not going to. She decided to resign from the post of Speaker. There was then a very short power vacuum for just a few days, and Former Chairman Jocelyn Pena-Melnick of the Health and Government Operations Committee was elected by the Democratic caucus and then by the General Assembly in a special session to be the new Speaker of the House. She has made some very, very significant changes in her short tenure so far. One thing is she's created a new standing committee. So there used to be 6 standing committees in the House of Delegates of the General Assembly. Now there are 7. And the new committee is basically government operations, procurement, and election law is going to be a separate committee now. And it's going to have a few other areas of jurisdiction, but that's primarily what it's going to be. And so all the other committees are going to be slightly smaller. For example, my Judiciary Committee went from 21 down to 17 members. And she also appointed a new vice chairman and vice chairman of a number of different committees and positions. Every single person in leadership only has one leadership post now. So there are, we counted them, 76 chairman and vice chairman now in the House of Delegates. That's a lot considering
Wow.
and so yeah. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
juggling for the speaker to do now. Yep.
Yeah, so a lot of getting used to a whole new leadership kind of structure and the way that the new speaker does things. It's obviously there's a learning curve there. But wearing your Judiciary Committee hat and as chairs this of the Civil Law and Procedure Subcommittee, what issues or bills do you anticipate will dominate discussions this session? Are there any proposals that you think could significantly impact how we operate in the judiciary in Maryland?
Again, the good news is that I chair the Civil Law Subcommittee. The bad news is that with a new process that's now being reinstated as of last year, we don't know what bills have been introduced until the first day of session.
Hmm.
They've all been pre-filed. Most bills have already been pre-filed. So we probably have, if I had to guess, close to 2,000 bills that have been filed already, but they won't be made public until next year. Excuse me, until next week. So, um, what am I hearing? I am hearing that we will probably have really in your area. But it is in the civil law realm. There will be some debt collection bills that will be introduced and reintroduced. There's going to be there was a medical debt bill basically prohibited having last year it was a prohibition against having that affect your credit rating if you have medical debt. Um, because of some of the budgetary issues and some of the affordability issues that have been a nationwide theme going on, and given sort of the politics of our administration, our governor, and the new House and the House leadership, not be surprised if there are bills dealing with debt collection, specifically, perhaps trying to increase the amount that is waived from being able to be collectible and garnishments. I haven't heard anything yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is something that does that. I wouldn't be surprised if there is an effort to try to increase the amount that you have to have in debt before it can be attempted to be collected in ways. Again,
Hmm.
I don't
So,
know
so
whether those are going to be whether they're I can't see them being successful personally, but there's certainly issues that will be brought up.
Right. And I would think, obviously, because of the economy, there might be that push, like you're mentioning, to increase exemptions on wage garnishments and maybe in those kinds of things. But again, we've dealt with those um, year after year, many times
Yep.
in Maryland, and we figured out a way to balance, the consumer protection and business interests, and that's really the trick. Um,
Data
so,
privacy is interesting. They're probably given the the increase in legislation trying to regulate AI, and the sort of the balance and the fight between the federal government and the states in terms of regulating AI. An offshoot of that is data privacy and how the states are going to regulate data privacy. Maybe that's an area where the feds will give them more jurisdiction. So that's something to look at, and that could impact the creditors' rights in terms of what information is going to be available and whether there's vulnerabilities in people and increased fraud effort or efforts to claim fraud based on data privacy.
Yeah, so that definitely is a hot topic and something that can affect creditors' rights practitioners, especially dealing with thousands of pieces of information about different consumers. So something that industry's going to keep a close eye on.
Hmm.
Switching gears, you kind of just mentioning the federal government. There's a lot of buzz at the federal level about trying to curtail or even shut down the CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. How do you see that playing out at the state level? Is there a more aggressive state regulators or a shift in enforcement priorities? Do you see at the state level, legislators trying to fill in the gaps where maybe the CFPB is no longer aggressive?
Sure. I just moved my camera because you guys were looking at the back of my bald head. Um, so the answer is yes, I believe, given Maryland, given our Attorney General and his sort of positions on consumer rights and what's happening on the federal government with the CFPB, that there will be an effort to try to fill that void on a state level. Um, the Attorney General, Anthony Brown, may say that they've already filled the void's already filled, it's already there, and they already have the ability to do it on a state level. That being said, I'm dabbling into federal policy, even though I'm not an expert on federal politics. But it wouldn't surprise me if there was if the CFPB is made impotent, then it wouldn't surprise me if the next administration reversed those decisions. So
Yeah.
that's not something to look at as a permanent change. And so we don't necessarily want to make changes on a state level that would be very hard to reverse as well.
Yeah, no, that you're making some great points, And finally, as someone who understands both the legislative and the practical side of creditors' rights, how do you see the balance evolving, between consumer protection and the rights of creditors, not just in Maryland, but nationally when we talk about these issues? I mean, and again, you go to a lot of national conferences for legislators. How do you see that, have we figured out a balance?
There has to be a balance, first of all, and everybody has to realize that they got to work together. Um, I'm going to get political I don't know how political I should get, but the rule of law and respecting the integrity of the rule of law is essential for creditors' rights, is probably the most important thing. And it drives me crazy when we create opportunities for the rule of law to be questioned or for people to think that it shouldn't apply based on that agreements and contracts shouldn't apply based on people just realizing that they couldn't do what they thought they could, even though they've agreed to it, and there are consequences to that. And that's true with that versus a contract in a business, and the business goes up and you don't want to have to adhere to your end of the bargain. Well, you know what? You take the risk. You have to understand that's part of doing business. And it's not fair for the other side of the contract to have to suffer the consequences of you not being required to adhere to it. That being said, this is where I'm getting political. If we have a presidential administration, the Trump administration has decided that the rules don't necessarily apply to them. And this is me as a Democrat talking about the other party. The rules don't apply to them, but it should apply to everybody else. And that is where you lose the integrity of the judiciary, the judicial process, and the rule of law. If the rules don't apply to a certain group simply because they don't want it to, that's going to be a problem. So if I had to say, if I was the benevolent dictator, I would say that we need to respect the rule of law, and it applies to everybody, regardless of who you are and who you work for. And that is the best way to protect creditors' rights.
Yeah, well said. And so John, I think that's going to bring us to the end of our cup of coffee today. Thank you for sharing your perspective. It's always great to hear from you, and especially as someone that understands really the policy side and the practice side, and things are never really just black and white. So we'll be watching closely as the session unfolds. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on today's episode of Coffee Break. We appreciate you taking the time to stay informed and connected with us. So until next time, stay engaged, stay informed, and of course, stay caffeinated. So thank you, John.
Thank you
All
very much.
right, thanks, everyone.